This is a reading from Magic of the Iron Pentacle, Reclaiming Sex, Pride, Self-Power and Passion, that I co-wrote with my friend Gede Parma. It was released by Llewellyn in February 2016. This is one of my memoir pieces out of the sex section. It's a memoir called Giving Birth. That moment of giving birth. Like nothing else on earth, like everything on earth. The moment that is everything, the first moment, when the whole universe stills, catches its breath, this moment. All those hours of labour, those months of pregnancy, gone, and now this hinge, the tipping second, the gateway into life. Breathe. I breathe for you. I've been breathing for you for weeks, months, forever. For your whole forever, it's been my breaths you've been taking. And now we're on the verge of your breath. Your first breath. The beginning breath. The start of things. A whole new thing. You. But not yet. Still this twisting passage. Still the pulsing walls. Blood, muscle, flesh pounding, squeezing, pulsed out, pushed beyond, downward, outward, into the unknown, beyond all that ever was, outside everything, leaving paradise, the becoming. This has been done so many times, once in variation for each of us alive now, as well as for each of us who is now dead. Through all the times, all the places. In India this is done, in China, Africa, Scandinavia, Russia, on small islands, and in large cities, in towns and tents, and every place in between. Women do this thing, this giving birth thing. Many women. Most women, probably, do this once or twice in their life, or maybe more. I am most women. I am many women. I am one woman doing this many times done thing, this oh so ordinary, spectacular, nothing like it on earth in a lifetime, this once only being born time. You who my body and living have swung around planet-like to your sun for 9 months, 10 moons, for the entirety of you, your becoming, every moment and heartbeat of that I've been oriented to you, given over, my blood and flesh in service to yours, my own heartbeat, breath, and the cradle of my womb dedicated to getting you this far, to helping you make the way you are arriving now, minutely. Contraction, past contraction, rippling you forward through time and flesh to your own time, to your own belonging into yourself. There's been a confusion of cars and times and a storm in the night. It's past midnight, past the sudden rain that broke onto the city, causing minor floods, road diversions and upsetting many New Year's Eve plans. It's New Year's Eve. Past that really, into the early hours of the new day, New Year. There have been contractions for 8 hours, lingering through the day and intensifying into night. 8 hours is the average time for a first labour, and there's a relief in being average. Just another birth, another woman and baby, nothing spectacular, nothing more dangerous or worrisome than is usually involved in this life and death rending of the world. Ordinary is good. And yet, of course, it's not ordinary. This thing that I will do once only in my lifetime. This event that will happen to him only once. The start of every other event ever to happen to him, made possible only by this act. Him, made possible only by this. Of course it isn't ordinary. It's unique, spectacular, has never happened before, is multicoloured and all-encompassing. It's everything held here, in that press of baby's head against the perineum. Everything. People rush around. We've been in the birthing centre for only 10 minutes, 10 quite crowded minutes, and we're into the middle of it, already about to birth. I can't believe there's so much shouting. We're supposed to be quiet. I don't want the baby born into these loud voices and frantic instructions. The midwife is stuck. She can't leave us now that it's happening this minute. She hasn't had time to tell anyone else. She asks someone to stand in the door and shout loud enough for another midwife to come. They're shouting about who's in the room and who's not, how fast it's moving, and really none of that matters terribly, because what's happening is that someone's being born. Earlier in the evening, I forgot what I was doing. I forgot I was giving birth. I was just on the receiving end of vast, mounting pains that came and went in dark waves with not much logic or purpose. I knew my body was at the centre of it, but I had forgotten someone else's was too. In dizzy transition, I lay on my bed and I thought maybe I was in a forest with tremendously tall trees, mountain ash. I would have sworn I was there for an hour or so. It was quite restful, especially compared with the pain, and I had no particular desire to return to lying on the bed in pain. Later, they told me it was literally between one contraction and the next, that forest, that someone remembered I liked forests and spoke one to me, just for a moment. Time has swept us up into its unpredictable arms. Before, it lingered and lazed about, leaping and leaving in jagged lumps through contractions and pauses between contractions. Now we are in the waterfall of it, and all downward force, one way and irrefutable. This is not time that ticks or measures, but time that floods, and we, the baby and myself, are flotsam, tossed and carried about. I shouted out myself to be quiet. Please, can we be quiet? And by now, enough of the right people have arrived that there's a settling in the room, a focusing. And I hear the midwives talking, mainly not to me, and I look at my friend's face and mimic her breathing as she shows me the panting. And I have no way to assess or critique it if it helps or if it's the right thing to do, but in that moment, her face became the whole world. And I still have it imprinted in my mind as my memory of that birth, as what I actually saw compared with what I felt and what I imagine it looked like to others. On my hospital record it has observed length of labour 10 minutes, internal examinations nil, and then nil, nil, nil all the way down the page, next to consultations, medications, just about everything. As far as low interference births go, it certainly was one, but it still wasn't peaceful or calm. Not even counting all that shouting and panic. And I panicked myself when I realised the baby's father wouldn't even be there in time, as he was parking the car, and even though it was the early hours of the morning, these things take at least some time to park and to walk back to the building, to get a lift to whatever floor we're on, to find the right room. Though I suppose he could just follow all the shouting. But I put that aside as those ripping pieces came in from the outside, the bit where it seems definite I am to be torn in half in order to achieve this birth. And the panting my friend showed me was to slow down the delivery. Not that I hadn't been slowing it down for an hour already, though I didn't know that, on my knees and face down in the back of the car. I only knew that that was the single, only possible posture I could be in and still be in the car. And we've left it so late, this longish drive to the hospital, this arrival in the birthing centre, not because we're irresponsible or flirting with fate, but because, one way and another, we'd been led to believe that it would be hours yet, maybe another 6 or 8 hours, they told us. And we came to hospital not because of imminent birth, but because the 2 people with me were entirely sick of the whole thing, exhausted, and wanted support. If we'd stayed another 10 minutes, if they'd listened to my refusal to get into the car, or if any one of us had known a thing about what was actually happening, we would never have got into that car, and I would have given birth at home, surprisingly and sudden. And I suppose the hospital would have sent an ambulance when they realised what had happened, and then I would have been taken to the nearest, quite ordinary hospital, and not tucked away in a birthing centre with midwives and private rooms and a tolerance for the red candles and eucalypt saplings I dragged in here with me. There's a moment that happens when I lost everything. I've spoken to other women since who've given birth, and some of them had recognised it when I described it. The baby had been getting lower and lower through this whole process, closer and closer to the outside world, to being born. Part of me is going with it, of course. 9 months of concentrated hope and attention, a whole world's worth of investment in the future. All through the whole experience, I've been aware of a kind of spark, a core, a centre point of gold fire that pinned me to the world. I couldn't get too lost because of that. My mind might forget, but my body couldn't forget what it was doing. I was so tied into the life force, so in service to it, that the gold burned brighter than maybe it ever had in my life. Or maybe I was more aware of it. I felt it holding me and the baby, literally keeping us on this side of life, the heart of us beating, never giving way. I felt that spark, that pin, dropping lower in my body as it guided the way out, found safe passage for the baby who still breathed, who journeyed, who separated molecule by molecule, and I knew, when I knew anything, that I was doing this thing. It was my spark, my life force steering events, forming safe passage, creating this process. The baby was, as it always had been, a part of me, and so it shared that spark. Close it came, so close to the outside world, and as the baby's head emerged from my body, I felt that spark leave me. It wasn't mine, after all. It belonged to life, not to me, and it went with the imperative. I had no doubt at all in those seconds while his head emerged that were one of us to die just then, it would be me. I was hollow of it. I could feel it in him, still beating between my legs, but no longer mine. And then the shoulders, those great wrenchings. And I can't justify why they seemed worse even than the head, except to say they happened when I was at my most vulnerable, devoid, suddenly, of what I had always carried and known to be my own, that fierce spark of survival, that will to live, that's instinctual, biological, except now he had it and I did not. As the shoulders pass through, something else happens, and now I am just grateful, just receiving, not expecting anything in this moment, to be saved even. But that spark is taken with him doubles, duplicates, and is instantly 2, not 1, and one of them stays with me, while the other continues with the baby, slippery down through hips and legs as he's free of me, except the cord that still joins us. And I looked right into the face of darkness then. I saw my death as nature's choice, and no sentiment in it, not fear or regret, but simple calculation. He is the stronger. Life is firstly his. It was a glimpse of the tearing honesty of biology, my gift of life, that literally every time and every life is made at the brink of death, and sometimes, many times, in many places, has brought death. Death to both, death to child, death to mother. Oh, death is in there, right up close in the moment of birth, as close to the other as the cord is twisted tight and strong, and no separating the two. They're making love there, birth and death, as the baby emerges, and one wins for a while, one shines out over the other, but always things turn around and the other side will triumph. This in and out of sperm-penetrating egg, the inness of the act of sex, the outness as the baby is born, the life and death of it, the breath of it, the spark escaping and reignited, the panted, shouted, tearing of it. This is sex at its raw edge. Sex as bloody and born and blessed each time. So that's a segment from The Magic of the Iron Pentacle. And there are memoir sections all through this book in the sex, pride, self, power and passion chapters. Thank you.